There's nothing quite like seeing Richard Sharpe lead a ragtag band of riflemen into the jaws of hell. Muskets blazing, bayonets fixed, and that grim determination in his eyes. You just know someone's about to have a very bad day. Over the course of the Sharpe TV series, we've seen him fight in every kind of battle the Napoleonic Wars could throw at him. From desperate sieges and bloody street fights, to wide open field battles and last-ditch defences. But here's the thing, not all of these battles are created equal. Some are gritty, explosive masterclasses in low-budget warfare, making you forget the limits of a TV production. Others, while still fun, lack the same impact. So, let's start at number 10. At number 10, we have the village defence at the end of Sharpe's peril. This climactic battle unfolds in a dusty, sun-baked plains of India. It's a change of scenery for Sharpe, but the fundamentals remain the same. A small, outnumbered force, a determined enemy, and an improvised defensive stand. The setup is simple but effective. Sharpe and Harper, escorting a convoy of soldiers, civilians and wounded, arrive at a remote way station of sorts, little more than a few walls, gates and outbuildings. They are being hunted by Colonel Dragomirov, a ruthless, well-armed adversary intent on wiping them out. Outnumbered and low on supplies, Sharpe has no choice but to make a stand here. He gets the village leader, Chitu, and the rest of the residents on side for the upcoming battle. Singh repairs a very old cannon found in a hut, and Wormwood wants to desert, but his two cronies decide actually they're better off fighting alongside Sharpe. Sharpe apologises to Barabbas Hagueswell for his earlier treatment, and agrees to let him fight. However, that night, Wormwood frees Barabbas, and tells him that Sharpe plans to execute him in the morning. Both Barabbas and Wormwood ride away separately. Wormwood joins Dragomirov, and tells him all about Sharpe's defences. When Dragomirov finally commits his all-out assault, his men come forward in waves, a small artillery piece of Dragomirov's probe Sharpe's defences. Sharpe's defenders, already weary, respond with controlled and deliberate volleys. Every shot must count, ammunition is low, and Dragomirov's numbers are still overwhelming. In the thick of the fighting, Beauclair proves himself and honours his family name by protecting the women when enemy forces enter the hut. He is unfortunately struck down whilst protecting them, a death that's not just heroic, but thematically fitting. Elsewhere, Wormwood, the treacherous turncoat, finds himself face to face with one of his old comrades, and in a moment of cold brutality, he stabs Private Quilter down. His betrayal is complete, but short-lived, as Harper comes to the rescue, and in somewhat of a short scuffle, Harper enacts revenge and kills Wormwood. At the last moment, Indian cavalry arrive, led by Barabbas, who had ridden the entire night to bring reinforcements to assist Sharpe. Something of a surprise to Sharpe, to be sure. The battle concludes with the duel between Dragomirov and Sharpe. Sharpe, somewhat weakened after saving Barabbas earlier, is able to muster his usual inner strength and overpower and defeat Dragomirov. The battle was hard fought, and many casualties were sustained, but something at the end incredible occurred. Simerson, who had been in poor health from torture, says farewell to Sharpe with a tone of respect. Something no one expected. One of the real strengths of this battle is its clarity of geography. Being filmed in India helps the authenticity of the battle, rather than being filmed on a green screen in a studio. We always know where the fighting is, where the weak spots are, and how close the enemy is to breaking through. And for a TV production with limited sets, this is vital. The pacing is also very well handled. The battle unfolds in distinct phases, with periods of intense fighting separated by short lulls that allow for quick dialogue, beats, and repositioning. Character involvement is another plus. Everyone is important in this episode and has a role to play. It's not just Sharpe and Harper doing all the work. The secondary characters, even those not built for war, contribute to the defence in some way, which makes the victory feel earned by the group, not just the leads. On the other hand, the scale is modest. This is, at the end of the day, a small set dressed to look like a railway station, and you can feel the constraints. The enemy numbers never quite match the threat level the script implies. We hear about a much larger force, but on screen it feels like the same kind of 24 attackers cycling through each shot. The cinematography, while functional, doesn't use much variety. There are a few wide, sweeping shots to sell the size of the attack, and the focus stays tightly locked on close quarters action. It is number 10 because, despite these limitations, it's a textbook example of Sharpe's leadership under pressure. We see his ability to read a battlefield, improve what's at hand, and inspire men to hold when everything looks lost. It's tight, tense, and gives us exactly what we want. Moving next to number 9, which is the opening battle in Sharpe's Revenge, which is loosely based on the real Battle of Toulouse. Sharpe's Revenge wastes no time in throwing us into the action. The opening battle is a textbook example of Bernard Cornwell's knack for starting a story with a bang, even if, in the TV adaptation, it's streamlined for budget and pacing. The setting is a French-held hill fort led by General Calvet and Sharpe's long-term nemesis Ducos. On screen, the geography is kept simple: high stone walls, guarded towers, and a very narrow approach. The British forces are led by Major General Ross, Colonel Wigram, and Sharpe, and they are already in position when we join them, and they are currently under a little bit of artillery fire from the fort. Wellington initially asks Colonel Wigram to go first, to the annoyance of Ross, and the amusement of Sharpe, Harper, and Frederickson, and they were right to laugh. Wigram's attempt at storming the fort was, let's just say, rather weak. He uses no discernible tactics except for marching en masse towards the fort. We see them being under constant artillery fire and being picked off by French forces. And as expected, this assault was easily defeated, with his men retreating back to Ross and Sharpe's position. Sharpe, under the command of Ross, is sent to punch a hole into the fort, to enable Ross with the main force to enter and storm it. Sharpe does this very well. He leads his men from the front. He instructs the use of grappling hooks and explosives to create that breach. Although, as with any battle, casualties are always expected, and it showcases the cost of war during this period. One thing I did notice during this battle, and I'm not sure whether it's a filmmaking error, when the explosion occurs at the fort, we see on the top left of the screen 2 people. They are not in any uniform, and they are just looking in the direction of the scene. Perhaps some extras wanting some more screen time, or maybe just the demolition crew. Who knows? Another funny part was when Sharpe and his men used the grappling hook to bring down the wooden defence. It brings a cannon out, which is normal to a degree, but a French soldier does a sort of dive onto the falling defences, rather dramatically, shall we say. Sharpe regroups his men with Ross, who unfortunately gets struck by artillery and is injured. Now, another slight continuity error here. You can see Ross's leg has the red mark before he gets hit by the artillery. They obviously didn't have much more budget for spare trousers for Ross. Sharpe then leads his men through the breach in the fort, and after some chaotic hand-to-hand fighting between the British and the French forces, they successfully capture it. Now, Ducos, who has always hated Sharpe, tries to strike a killing blow against him. However, Sharpe uses the classic kick him in the balls technique. Sharpe, however, lets him escape with his life, not before destroying his glasses with Ducos' hand underneath. The day is won, and Napoleon abdicates his throne. This episode in particular changes a few things from the novel. For example, Colonel Wigram replaced Horace Banfield in the show in relation to the duel and the following court-martial. We also have Nairn's role, and that's given to Major General Ross, as we know, an original recurring character in the series. And the character's fate is changed, so Ross is merely wounded, whereas Nairn is killed at Toulouse. The battle itself is basic but done well. This opening assault isn't here to be the biggest or the most important battle in the series, it's here to remind us who Sharpe is. It's a shot of adrenaline before the main story kicks in, showing him in his element, leading from the front, outpacing his peers, and thriving in the chaos of combat. It's quick, efficient, and satisfying, even if it's more of a sharp skirmish than an epic battle. But for all of its energy, this is clearly a modest production. The fort feels more like a fortified outpost than a major military position, and the small numbers of defenders limit the sense of scale. As this is meant to be based off of the Battle of Toulouse, you would have liked to have seen a bit more going on, as well as potentially seeing Wellington, maybe some more units, and multiple siege points. And this is just another casualty of the low budget the series received, and as I mentioned previously, it does have continuity errors and somewhat odd choreography. But it's a fun opening battle, and that is a precursor to the political intrigue and redemption arc of the episode. And that's why it lands at number 9. Next now we move to number 8, which is the Battle of the Fort at Villafranca. This battle is one of the more contained sieges in Sharpe TV series, and it does benefit from that tighter focus. What also works for this battle is the previous engagement with Sharpe and Leroux. After it was discovered Leroux was a French spy and killed a young officer whilst fleeing British custody, Colonel Berkeley attacked the fort at night. But the French forces had been forewarned, and the assault is bloodily repulsed. Berkeley is killed at the outbreak of the battle, leaving Sharpe in charge. As Sharpe gains the top of the wall, he is faced by a counterattack led by the escaped French colonel. After the duel, Sharpe is not only physically wounded, but demoralised at the loss of his sword. While he recovers, he sends for British artillery, and orders his most literate rifleman, Harris, to decode the message he took from Leroux. Harris of course succeeds in breaking the code. The message unmasks Spears as a traitor, after he had been taken captive, tortured, and then blackmailed by Leroux. Sharpe, being a decent fellow, gives Spears the opportunity for an honourable death. And, with the cannon finally arriving, the fort is softened up by an artillery barrage, destroying the main gate. Spears charges single-handed, fighting off the French and planting a British flag at the fort's entrance, rousing the morale of the British. But unfortunately, he is killed shortly after, yet he certainly died with honour. Sharpe and the South Essex then begin to march towards the fort. A subplot during this battle is the interaction between Lass, Simmerson and Father Curtis. Lass rejected Simmerson's advances and sent him packing at gunpoint previously, so Simmerson, obviously being the scum that he is, rather took this badly, and attempts to force himself on her at sword point. Luckily, Father Curtis arrives to brutally bitch-slap Simmerson, sending him away sobbing and humiliated. Back to the battle, the British storm the fort, under fire from artillery and French soldiers. Sharpe, still somewhat recovering, cannot fight at 100%, and during the chaos of the British and French fighting, Harper is knocked out. Sharpe, under fire behind a wagon, sends Harris and Hagman with explosives to set them off inside the central building of the fort. This is successful and causes the French to surrender their arms. When Leroux tries to surrender, Sharpe offers him a duel to the death instead, something I think we were all hoping for. And because Sharpe is just not human, he fights with grit and determination, even though he is still recovering from injury. Sharpe is able to defeat Leroux, ensuring there is one less enemy for the British to contend with. And we end on a happy note with Harper, thinking he is at death's door, asking to marry Ramona, to which Father Curtis gleefully obliges. Harper is made aware that he won't die, and that he can now concentrate on being just a very good husband and father. Now, as normal, we do have a few changes from the novel. Rather than this battle, it is the Battle of Salamanca, which is the climax of the story. Sharpe takes part in the famous charge of the KGL cavalry at Garcia Hernandez and breaks French infantry squares. None of this is shown in the TV episode, which ends with the attack on the Salamanca forts. One must assume that the TV show did not have the full battle due to the numbers required, and the difficulty of portraying a full cavalry charge on that scale. It is easier to write down a battle than to display it on screen. Also, with Jack Spears, he dies as a hero in both the novel and the show, but in the former, he is not urged to do so by Sharpe, who discovers his betrayal only while he is dying. The battle itself from the outset is staged with clear intent. The British must take Villafranca quickly, both to deny the French a strong defensive position and to protect their intelligence network. The fort itself is a convincing location, to be fair, and one of the strongest elements is how the battle is tied directly to the episode's stakes. This isn't just about capturing a random fort, it's about safeguarding the life and mission of Almeriador, whose work could tip the balance of the war in Spain. It also acts as a revenge arc for Sharpe against Leroux, who deceived the British officers, killed in cold blood, and nearly killed Sharpe. That gives the fighting an urgency that goes beyond military routine, and it allows Sharpe's leadership and personal investment to shine. The scale, as with many Sharpe battles, is where it falls short. Villafranca never quite feels as heavily defended as a real Napoleonic era fort should be. The number of defenders on screen is relatively small, and the fight is over within minutes of the breach. There's also a slight neatness to the choreography. The fighting on the walls is well shot, but it has that stage quality. You never feel like the defenders are throwing everything they have at the attackers. The violence is there, but it's contained and controlled in a way that's more about clarity for the viewer, rather than for chaos. However, for me, it still does work. It's focused, narratively essential, and paced with precision. It might not have scale or ferocity, but its tight staging and emotional stakes enhance it, and allows for real character development for Sharpe. It's a solid mid-tier battle, not the most spectacular, but dramatically effective and well executed within the constraints of TV production, which is why it's number 8 for me. Next we have number 7, and I have the final fortress battle at Farragut in Sharpe's challenge. The climactic battle takes us back to the blazing heat of India. The fortress of Farragut is the stage, an imposing stronghold bristling with cannon, sitting at the heart of rebel territory. The tension has been building throughout the episode, as Sharpe has gone undercover with Harper to rescue the captured Cecilia Burrows. Dodd is commanding a well-drilled Indian rebel force with the help of French officers looking to gain wealth in India. And by the time the final assault begins, the stakes are clear, and the battle has multiple layers to it which enhance the action. We have the siege element, with the British trying to take the fort, the internal element involving Sharpe, Harper, who have been imprisoned after being discovered as spies, and the damsel in distress element involving Cecilia Burrows, who is a prisoner in need of rescuing. The battle itself starts with the British Indian forces creating a breach into the fortress for their artillery. General Burrows then commands McCrae to send the Forlorn Hope to take the wall. As the British climb in the dark, the Indian defenders were waiting for them, showering the attackers with rockets and firing from the walls to counter their advance. Sharpe and Harper are able to escape their captivity, only to be encountered by the turncoat Shadrach Bickerstaff, who has a few rather large men with him. French officers Goudon and Bonnet have arrived just in the nick of time. They decide to help Sharpe, after being disgusted by the Condé Rao's treatment of prisoners of war. Sharpe sends them to rescue Cecilia Burrows, whilst he and Harper find a way to save the British from the trap laid by Dodds. The British, still advancing, are being shot down like pigs for the slaughter. Even the Condé Rao is popping off a few shots. Until learning of Sharpe or Harper's escape, Dodd seems unconcerned, as he has a plan. He has laid explosives under the fortress for when the British send all their forces forward, and at the right time, he will ignite the explosives and blow away the British forces to Kingdom Come. Colonel Goudin attempts to rescue Cecilia Burrows, only to be stabbed in the back by Bickerstaff, to the despair of Bonnet. The British are getting closer to the top of the breach, which is by design of Dodds, who waits for just the right time. Sharpe and Harper, in a way to stop the trap, move a barrel of rockets in position to set it off early. before inflicting mass casualties. Their position is compromised and attacked by the Kande Rao and his men, but, as always, they are saved in the nick of time. The explosion knocks out everybody nearby, and to the dismay and anger of Dodds, he flees the battlements with Madhavanti. The British forces are now able to take the fortress with a little bit less resistance. The Kande Rao is captured. Shadrach Bickerstaff is blasted by Harper's knot gun, and Madhavanti is killed after being angered by the rejection of Dodds. He calls her a whore. And we finally get the sword fight between Sharpe and Dodds. In a back and forth duel, Sharpe's experience and grit is enough to get the upper hand of the traitor. With the battle won, there are many casualties. Cecilia Burrows is reunited with her father, who herself offers Sharpe the position of general, but he declines, and rides off into the distance with Harper. So this episode is a new creation from ITV, and is an amalgamation of Sharpe's Tiger, Triumph and Fortress. And as a visual, you can see it has much more budget than the original series. You can see with the number of extras used, the location is much grander, and the practical effects are more advanced. The combination of siege gunfire, massed infantry movement, and the interior fighting sells this as a full-scale assault. The breach assault is handled with satisfying energy. The climb over rubble and a musket fire feels physical and urgent, while explosions kicking up dust and smoke give the scene real texture. The direction wisely keeps cutting between Sharpe's immediate fight and the wider battle, so you never lose sight of the bigger picture. And the character involvement is really strong here too. Harper gets his share of the action, and the supporting cast each have their beats in the fight. The fighting is also tightly choreographed, which makes for clarity, but sometimes robs the combat of the chaotic messiness you'd expect in a real breach assault. And the final sword fight between Dodds and Sharpe is somewhat anticlimactic for me, but it does a passable job. Still, as a piece of TV action, it works. The stakes are personal and political, the pacing builds steadily to the breach, and the Dodds-Sharpe duel gives a proper dramatic climax. It's not the most historically accurate depiction of British siege warfare in India, but it captures the spirit of those battles. Determined attackers, a heavily defended position, and victory wrestled through grit and leadership. And for all that earns this battle a place at number 7. Now moving to number 6, Sharpe's defence of the Comte de Marquer's castle in Sharpe's siege. The setup is brutally simple. After Sharpe seizes a French coastal castle by stealth, the mission's nominal commander, Colonel Banfield, gets duped by the Comte de Marquer and Duco in disguise into thinking the job's done and Sharpe is dead. Therefore, he is told to blow the gates and destroy the captured ammunition. He also elects to leave the wounded, and he marches back to Wellington to get all the glory. When Sharpe arrives at the castle, his position is precarious. He's low on men, supplies and ammunition, and with no guarantee that reinforcements will arrive. French General Calvet arrives with a somewhat sizable but inexperienced force, and under a flag of truce, the Comte de Marquer reveals himself to be Napoleon's agent, and offers to let the British go free, provided that they leave Sharpe behind. Sharpe gives his men the floor to voice their opinions, to which Robinson inquires if the Comte de Marquer was the one who killed Riley, and after he admitted to it, Robinson replies for them all, "Fight them to the finish, sir." With the Comte leaving, Robinson takes a pop at him from range. Unfortunately, it doesn't kill him, but Hagman comes in and is able to eliminate the swine. Now to battle. Sharpe and his men only have 18 rounds each, due to the destruction of the ammunition. Earlier, out of gratitude for Sharpe providing her mother with quinine, the Comte's sister had told them to burn a cellar full of oyster shells to produce lime. This provides the British with another powerful defensive weapon. When the battle begins and the French attack, they are met by accurate volley fire from the British, and as the French continue to advance and ammunition running low, Sharpe's men dump the powdered lime from the walls, blinding their foes as they break into the castle. Sharpe's men then proceed to massacre the helpless Frenchmen in rather expert fashion. The British have just run out of ammo, so Sharpe orders a slow advance to strike the fear of God into them. And it works. Well, of course it does. One thing that must be said is that I do really enjoy Calvé and Gaston in this show. They are essentially the Chuckle Brothers of the series. After victory is complete, Sharpe reports back to Wellington, and Colonel Banfield, well, he gets into a rather lot of trouble. Now, as always, there are quite a few changes here from the novel. For example, the adaptation gives the Marquère a sister, Catherine, who remains behind at the fort when it's captured by the British, and she serves as a somewhat secondary love interest to Sharpe. There was a nautical element to this battle, but that's been removed, and it makes Banfield the new commanding officer of the Prince of Wales' Own Volunteers, instead of junior post-captain of the HMS Vengeance. And the character Cornelius Killick, who is an American privateer, is also omitted altogether. The TV adaptation also changes the Comte de Marquère's death. In the show, he is killed by Hagman, whereas in the novel, Sharpe and his men chase and corner him. Sharpe accuses him of being a spy in Ducos's employ. Sharpe was told that the Marquère would hang if a court of inquiry found the charges to be true. Sharpe replied he did not like to see a man hang, so he ran Marquère through and his body dropped into the estuary. What the episode nails is that it's a pressure cooker rhythm of a defensive fight. You feel it for Sharpe, too few men, dwindling ammunition, and no real escape. And it is a refreshing change of pace from the many assaults in the series, and it plays out with a solid mix of tension, ingenuity, and desperation. It certainly isn't the longest battle, but it is very effective. Using the narrow entry point of the blown open gate is a smart tactical choice, and using the oyster shells as a defensive weapon was also incredibly clever. And they can thank Catherine for that. However, the TV production makes the French attackers feel more like a raiding party than a full regiment. Its clear budget limits the number of extras. Most of the fighting happens around the blown front gates, with little variation. We don't see attacks from multiple directions or real breach elsewhere, which is a little bit of a shame. However, it is shot well. The defence of the castle is tight. It contains siege sequence that thrives in tension and atmosphere rather than scale, and it shows Sharpe as a practical, no-nonsense leader, making the most of what he has. And while the action is smaller and more repetitive than series' best battles, it's solid pacing, hence why it's my number 6. For number 5, with the assault on Lou's stronghold in Sharpe's battle. The episode builds towards this confrontation after Sharpe is tasked with training Irish troops for a joint operation against Brigadier General Lou, a ruthless French officer notorious for massacres and cruelty. Lou has been using his stronghold as a base for raids, safe in the knowledge that its position and fortifications make it difficult to assault. The assault on the stronghold is the climax, a combined push by Sharpe's riflemen and the Irish Company allies to break Lou's hold on the region once and for all. Tensions are high even before the assault begins. Lord Kiley, learning his wife is pregnant, tries to send her away from the fighting, only for her to be captured by Lou's men. The trap is baited with a personal message. Juanita, trusted by Kiley, reveals her true colours as a French agent. She hands Kiley an ultimatum from Lou. During the attack, allow Sharpe's men to go first to get pinned down, but don't reinforce him with his Irish Company. In exchange, his wife will survive. As Sharpe leads the push against the stronghold, his men find themselves ambushed by French forces taking sustained fire. Sharpe fights his way out of the situation and goes to Kiley, who hasn't committed his men. The Irish Company has been fed false propaganda by Juanita, telling them about British killings in Ireland. When Kiley refuses to act, Sharpe fights him, only to be shot in the arm by Juanita, and at that point, Kiley finally rebels. He kills Juanita, and shows that she has distributed fake newspapers to undermine the Irishman's loyalty. Together, he and Sharpe lead the attack against the French. Meanwhile, Harper, in temporary command of Sharpe's company, tricks the French by pretending to be dead. And whilst the counterattack is in progress, Perkins sees the Irish Company appear, or a few members of them at least. He attempts to lead them into the fray, only to be stabbed by the traitor O'Rourke. Harper is devastated by the death of his youngest rifleman. We get a heartbreaking scene of Perkins being embraced by the chosen men. Harper, enraged with revenge, hunts O'Rourke down and gives him the death he deserves. As the battle draws to a close, Kylie spots Lou and follows him. He finds his wife and attempts to rescue her, only to be killed from behind by Lou. Although I am not sure people who are about to die explain so in such dramatic fashion. Sharpe discovers Lou and a dead Kylie. They engage in a duel. Lou gets the upper hand, only for Sharpe to pull it out of the bag in the last moment to defeat Lou. With the battle's close, Sharpe rescues Lucy and returns to his men, only to see that Perkins had died. A sad ending to an underrated chosen man. The TV show once again changes a few things from the novels. For example, Kylie doesn't actually have a wife. Kylie is also not killed by Lou. He commits suicide, which is a rather depressing death, so I understand why they didn't include that in the show. Also, Rifleman Perkins dies in the show, but in the book he survives. Another one is Lou is killed by Sharpe in not the dungeon as we see in the show, but in the ford over the river. Sharpe is shot and wounded by Don Juanita, who is in turn killed by Harper, and despite his wounds, Sharpe disarms and drowns Lou. There is a good amount that really works in this episode. The personal stakes are front and centre, and this isn't just an objective on a map, there's betrayal, redemption and revenge all baked into the fight. And there is a real good variety in the battle, from the initial assault, the duel with Kylie, the chosen men under attack, and the rescue of Lucy. So many small parts that combine this battle into a really good watch. The emotional impact of Perkins' death was superbly done. The acting was top draw and made you feel the loss. I even think the way they dealt with the Kylie Sharpe situation was done well, although the death of Juanita could have been a little bit more impactful. Lou also could have been a bit more advanced as a villain. He has the physical and mental threat nailed down, but I felt he could have been seen doing more horrible things rather than just being the aftermath of those. Another thing is that for a supposedly fortified stronghold, the French garrison just feels small. It never looks like a truly formidable position. But then this is another budgetary issue which is common throughout the series. Large battles do feel just more like skirmishes. But with all that, it works really well for me, which is why it's at number 5. It has good pacing, a good villain, and a couple of strong, really emotional payoffs. Now we have number 4, and the Battle of Andrades at the end of Sharpe's enemy. This battle is one of the most memorable in the Sharpe series, because it pits Sharpe against one of his most sadistic enemies, Sergeant Obadiah Hagueswell, in a desperate fight for hostages, survival, and revenge. It's the winter of 1813, and the town of Andrades is in the hands of deserters, a mix of French, British, and Spanish rogues, led by the French renegade Pottefaut, and, most importantly, Hagueswell. The captives include 2 high-profile women, Lady Farthingale and Madame Dubreton. Sharpe is initially charged with securing the release of Lady Farthingale, but diplomacy quickly fails. With tensions boiling and reinforcements scarce, Sharpe has no choice but to come up with another plan. That plan involves Sharpe sneaking into the village with Sergeant Harper and his chosen men on Christmas Eve, when the enemy is drunk and distracted. And with the aid of Kelly, they are able to free the captives. Kelly, who is a deserter that briefly served alongside Sharpe, and has somewhat grown disaffected with the conduct of the other deserters. And while they wait for Captain Fredrickson to bring up his company, it is revealed that Lady Isabella had been a prostitute and Sharpe her lover. With time of their hands, they resume their sexual relationship. Now that, for me, is just not cricket, as Sharpe is married to Teresa. The next day, the battle begins, with the chosen men rather rudely waking the deserters from their slumber with explosives. During the battle, the deserters are killed or captured, including Kelly, who Sharpe promotes to a chosen man as he dies. Hageswell, however, manages to escape with the captured Isabella, who runs into Sharpe's wife Teresa, who had been scouting the approaching French forces. Hageswell mortally wounds her. What a bastard. But luckily, he is caught by Dubreton, who hands him over to Sharpe. Sharpe is distraught to find Teresa at death's door. She holds him, and he holds her, all ending with her very sad death. It is at this moment Ducos arrives to fetch Dubreton, but also issue an ultimatum to the British. He demands the surrender of the village. Sharpe, of course, refuses, but when Farthingale tries to negotiate, Sharpe stops him by threatening to reveal Isabella's past to Lisbon Court, and therefore, phase 2 of the battle is on. He uses the horses linked to the rocket troop, and gives them lances. This would ruse the French into thinking the British have cavalry, and it does. They are somewhat shocked to see it. Sharpe also uses Congreve rockets to slow the advancing French, all whilst his men pick off the French from distance. This plan works, and they repel the French force, ensuring the British hold the village, and sends Ducos packing. The episode ends with Hageswell getting what he deserves, a bullet, putting an end to this agent of chaos. As is tradition with Sharpe, changes were made from the novel for TV purposes. The character of Josephina was not used and was replaced with the new character Isabella, who was played by Elizabeth Hurley. Teresa's death is also changed. She in fact is killed during the fight of Andradas with the French instead of before. Also, the task of finishing Hageswell's execution is not given to an anonymous officer, but it is Sharpe that delivers the killing blow. So, as a battle, it weaves many elements together that gives it a real edge, and it works because of the brutal, close quarters urban combat that just makes it feel dangerous. And what elevates this sequence is how it blends personal stakes with larger military objectives. Sharpe isn't just here to take a fortified position, he's here to rescue hostages. And I really like how the assault is structured, going from the quiet infiltration waiting game, giving time for Frederickson to get into position, to then shifting quickly to the explosive combat. The chaos of the battle gives that real urgent feel, and getting that redemption arc for Kelly was a nice touch, showcasing that people can redeem themselves. The death of Teresa is a real gut kick, something very hard to watch, but it adds so much emotion to the conflict. Then having Sharpe have to defend the town from the French just shows you how Sharpe is, yes, grieving, but still able to do his duty. What I will say is that the battle between the French and the British at the very end was slightly disappointing. It repeats shots, the scale was small, and it just didn't feel like Sharpe could lose. But despite that, for me it's a real important battle in the Sharpe show that shows Wellington, and us the viewer, that Sharpe is so much more than just a soldier. He is a leader of men, and that's why this ranks at number 4. Next, at number 3, we have the Battle of Talavera, the battle that made Sharpe famous. This battle serves as the final act of Sharpe's Eagle, and though it's compressed for television, it captures the chaos and high stakes of Napoleonic warfare remarkably well. It is a great setup, with Hogan explaining to Lawson the whereabouts of army positions and Wellington's tactics. When we get to the battlefield, Simonson, seeing a French column approach his position, flees. Sharpe, however, steadies the South Essex, who are much approved by his training. Sharpe, however, has another plan, therefore leaves them under the command of Captain Leroy. Amid cannon fire and smoke, the regiment is ordered to hold the line as French infantry advance. They succeed in stopping the French attack, and at just the right moment, Sharpe and his riflemen attack the wavering French soldiers in the flank, sending them into headlong retreat. What follows is a brutal engagement, close range volleys, bayonet charges, and just pure chaos. We do unfortunately see the death of Mr. Denny, which is sad, but is again common for this era. Sharpe, who is on an absolute mission, captures the French Imperial Eagle, fulfilling the mission set out earlier in the story, and redeeming the disgrace brought on by Simmerson's earlier blunders. And afterwards, Sharpe plants the eagle on Lennox's grave, honouring the legacy of a great man. Now, the real Battle of Talavera was a major engagement in the Peninsular War, and while the show condenses the events and doesn't depict the full scale, it accurately captures the feel of Napoleonic warfare: thick smoke, cannon fire, musket fire, and the terrifying chaos of the fighting. And though depicted with a modest budget and limited extras, it works. The scale is relatively small, yes, but it never feels insignificant because the stakes are so well defined: honour, survival, and legacy. It's not just a battle, it's where Sharpe proves himself as a battlefield leader under fire, earns the loyalty of his men, and cements the trust of Wellington. And that's why it goes into number 3 for me. This is the culmination of Sharpe's rise from outsider to leader. He's not officially in command, yet everyone follows him, and the direction balances limited resources with smart staging. It's not a sweeping war battle, but for Sharpe's journey, it's a perfect storm of action and character. Now we have number 2, which is the Battle for Torre Castro from Sharpe's Rifles. It isn't the biggest fight in the Sharpe series, but for me it's one of the most important. It marks Richard Sharpe's first real test as a leader, and the moment he earns his place among the chosen men. Sharpe, a newly field-promoted lieutenant after saving Sir Arthur Wellesley's life, is handed command of a group of unruly riflemen, the so-called chosen men, who at the beginning just want absolutely nothing to do with him. As they are stranded behind enemy lines, links up with Major Blas Vivar, who's on a covert mission to retake Torre Castro and raise the flag of the Gonfalon Santiago, in the hope it will rekindle Spanish resistance. Despite having just a handful of riflemen and a few Spanish allies, Sharpe agrees to help Vivar storm the city. The plan is to infiltrate it, due to some seduction techniques by Teresa. This enables the British and Spanish to launch a surprise attack against the French defenders inside the monastery turned barracks. Sharpe uses good tactics here: surprise, misdirection, and terrain, all whilst leading from the front. The mix of close quarters combat really enhances the battle. Blas Vivar crosses swords with the man in black, who turns out to be his own brother, and they engage in a duel, adding further tension to the battle. Vivar ultimately is victorious, and takes the banner to the top of the church tower, raising it high above the town as the fighting rages below. A symbolic and spiritual victory, even more than a strategic one. With victory complete, and Sharpe and his men and the Spanish allies leave the church, the adulation of the people is obvious. However, French commander de Leclerc rides out to confront Sharpe. He insists that no one shoots him, as Sharpe wants to finish the job. As Sharpe begins to get the upper hand, de Leclerc reaches for his pistol to shoot Sharpe. However, he is shot down, and it was Perkins who saved Sharpe, and is given the honour of becoming a chosen man. Now in the book, de Leclerc and Major Vivar's brother are killed in subsequent retreat from the city, and not within it. With their victory complete, Sharpe returns to a very pleased Wellesley, who has big plans that will inevitably involve Sharpe. So why is this number 2? Well, it's paced well, starting slowly with infiltration, then building up to the street level battle. You also have different elements going all at once, which enhance the battle itself, like the two brothers fighting, and the final duel between Sharpe and de Leclerc. Character work is another reason this stands out. The chosen men, who's been openly dismissive of Sharpe, watch him lead from the front, make the right calls under pressure, and risk himself as much as any of them. And by the time the French retreat and the mission is complete, the respect he's been struggling for is finally in his grasp. That shift in their dynamic gives the ending a satisfying emotional punch, making the victory feel both military and personal. The symbolic element of Blas Vivar raising the banner on the monastery's tower gives the battle an extra layer of meaning. It's not just about killing the enemy, it's about making a statement, and the visuals hammer that home. It is, however, not without its limitations. As always, the number of defenders for this garrison feels quite small, and the battle is over quite quickly once the element of surprise is lost. But here, the brevity works in the sequence's favour. This is a raid, not a siege, and it's paced to feel quick, sharp, and decisive. And it works because it delivers on multiple levels at once. It's tense, well-paced, urban assault, a symbolic victory for the Spanish cause, and the moment Sharpe proves himself worthy of command. It may not be large as scale, but doesn't need to be. Its power comes from how much it changes the people fighting in it. Now, number one for me could just only be the Siege of Badajoz in Sharpe's company. It forms the violent, emotional climax of the episode, and it's one of the most brutal sequences in the entire Sharpe TV series. The real-life siege took place in 1812 and was infamous for its bloodshed. The TV version follows that tone closely. The British army has surrounded the heavily fortified Spanish city of Badajoz, held by the French. And the siege is already in full swing when the episode reaches its final act. Regiments are sent into the breach, a narrow, corpse-choked passage blasted through the walls. And what follows is nightmare warfare. After the forlorn hope is sent in and are completely decimated by the French defenders, we see the horror of men crying out, losing their limbs, and in absolute fear. Sharpe himself was very lucky here, as he himself wanted to leave the forlorn hope before the army ravages the city. After witnessing all that death, Sharpe rallies the men and charges in. Under a hail of musket fire, explosives and flaming pitch, men are cut down by the dozens. The wounded clog the entry, and the living are forced to climb over the bodies. It's pure chaos. Filmed at night, with screams and fire dominating the soundscape. Amid the horror, Sharpe fights not just for victory, but to save Teresa and their newborn child, trapped inside the city. With the breach secure and the British inside, the real vision of war is seen. The British loot, rape, and destroy all in their path. A grim reality, and very accurate to what actually happened. We see Harry Price get to Teresa first to secure her safety, but Hagueswell had followed her. Price himself is shot, and Teresa is taken upstairs. Sharpe, racing to get to his wife and child, gets there just in time to save her from the despicable Hagueswell. They are reunited, and it is a happy moment, whilst there is utter chaos around them. Hagueswell unfortunately escapes, but as we know, he will get his comeuppance. We end with Wellington peering over the dead. He famously said that the capture of Badajoz affords as strong an instance of the gallantry of our troops as has ever been displayed, but I greatly hope that I shall never again be the instrument of putting them to such a test. Now, historically, Badajoz was one of the bloodiest sieges of the Napoleonic Wars, with over 4,800 British soldiers killed or wounded. The TV version captures as well the use of the breach, the scale of the slaughter, and the depiction of the British troops running riot after the victory. Looting, drunkenness, and revenge are all grounded in real events. All this is why it is without a doubt my personal favourite battle from the series. This is not just a battle scene, it's the closest Sharpe ever gets to a war horror film. It's unflinching in its portrayal of the cost of war, and it forces Sharpe and the viewer to confront the reality behind battlefield glory. This is Sharpe at his rawest. He's wounded emotionally and physically, stripped of command by Colonel Wyndham, desperate to protect Teresa and his child. He reclaims leadership not by rank, but by courage. Charging the breach, rallying the broken men, and executing battlefield justice. Harper too stands firm beside him, cementing their brotherhood. Leaving Wyndham humbled after the assault. The direction leans into the darkness, both literal and emotional. The night setting, flickering firelight, smoke, and disorientating editing create a sense of panic and claustrophobia. There are no clean heroics here, it's just muddy, confusing, and cruel. The novel is even more brutal and expansive, with a longer build-up and deeper exploration of the siege. The TV adaptation condenses some parts, but retains the emotional core. Notably, the TV version keeps the breach assault focused and intense, trimming side plots to maintain momentum, and it's a smart adaptation choice. I think to conclude, the Siege of Badahov is the best battle in Sharpe because it hits every note. It's historically grounded, tactically convincing, visually intense, and emotionally devastating. It's the rare TV battle where victory feels as heavy as defeat, and where the cost of taking the objective lingers long after the smoke clears. In a series full of great battles, this was its pinnacle. So, there we have it, my top 10 battles in the TV adaptation of Sharpe. Let me know if you agree with this list, or if you feel another battle should have made the top 10. Please do like, share and subscribe to help the channel grow, and follow me on my social channels. Thanks again, and I'll see you over the hills and far away.